The Great Hall of Nexus Station stretched for miles in every direction. Its crystal walls showed the stars beyond, making everyone inside feel like they were floating in space itself. Today, like every day for the past 3,000 years, representatives from 847 different species gathered here to make decisions for the galaxy. Ambassador Chen Wei-Lin stood at the human podium, her dark hair pulled back in a simple style. She wore the blue and silver uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Around her, beings of every shape and size filled the massive chamber. Some breathed water and sat in special tanks. Others were made of living crystal that sang when they spoke. A few were so tall they had to bend their necks to fit under the ceiling. The crystalline vapor wars are officially over, Chen announced to the assembly. Her voice carried clearly through the translation systems that let every species understand each other. After 437 years of conflict, both sides have agreed to the peace terms. A wave of clicking, humming, and other sounds of approval swept through the chamber. The Zephyrian delegate, a being that looked like a living cloud of silver mist, pulsed with colors that meant gratitude. The hegemony of Tal representative, a massive creature covered in purple scales, bowed its great head in respect. Chen had spent 3 years working on this peace deal. The crystalline beings and the vapor entities had been fighting over mining rights in the Orion Nebula since before humans had even discovered fire. Everyone said it was impossible to solve. The crystallines needed solid matter to reproduce. The vapors needed empty space to expand. How could both groups use the same area? The answer, Chen had realized, was time. The crystallines were active during certain cosmic seasons when stellar radiation was high. The vapors preferred the quiet periods between star formations. By creating a schedule that gave each group the nebula during their preferred times, both could get what they needed. It was typical human thinking. While other species saw only conflict, humans saw patterns and possibilities. That was why, despite being one of the youngest members of the Galactic Council, humanity held a permanent seat at the decision-making table. This peace treaty shows what we can accomplish when we work together, Chen continued. Different perspectives and different ways of thinking make us all stronger. The Council's Supreme Chancellor, an ancient being called Vex 9 that looked like a walking tree made of metal, spoke in its deep, booming voice. Humanity has once again proven its value to this assembly. Your species brings unique solutions to problems that have puzzled us for centuries. Chen smiled politely, but inside she felt a growing worry. There was something else she needed to discuss with the Council. Something far more urgent than trade disputes or territorial arguments. She had been trying to bring it up for months, but the Council always seemed too busy with smaller matters. Thank you, Chancellor, Chen said, but I must speak about another issue. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected something troubling in the void sectors. The void sectors were the empty regions between galaxy arms, where few species dared to travel. Ancient legends spoke of terrible guardians left behind by a civilization that had vanished millions of years ago. Most council members treated these stories as myths. Our sensors show massive structures awakening in the deep void, Chen explained. These structures are bigger than space stations, bigger than cities. They're scanning surrounding systems and sending out probe ships. We believe they are automated defense systems from the predecessor civilization. A murmur of concern rippled through the assembly, but Chancellor Vex 9 raised a metallic hand for silence. Ambassador Chen, while we appreciate your vigilance, the Council has more pressing matters to address. The trade route negotiations with the Outer Rim Confederacy require our immediate attention. With respect, Chancellor, this could be a threat to every living being in the galaxy, Chen insisted. These machines were built to eliminate any civilization that grew too advanced. If they're waking up after millions of years of sleep, it's because they've detected us. The Altarian representative, a tall blue humanoid with 4 arms, spoke up. Even if these machines exist, they are far away in empty space. Surely we have time to study the situation properly before taking any action. Chen felt her patience wearing thin. This was exactly the kind of thinking that frustrated her about the Council. They could spend decades debating the proper procedure while entire worlds burned. I'm not suggesting we panic, Chen said carefully, but humanity is prepared to organize a joint task force to investigate these structures. We have the ships and the technology to— That will not be necessary, interrupted the delegate from the Core Worlds Alliance, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish made of light. The Council has procedures for handling potential threats. We must form a committee to study this matter properly. Chen closed her eyes for a moment. She had seen this before. The council's answer to every problem was to form a committee, then a subcommittee, then a review board to oversee the subcommittee. By the time they finished studying something, it was usually too late to do anything about it. How long will this committee take to reach a decision? Chen asked. These matters cannot be rushed, Chancellor Vex 9 replied. Perhaps 3 to 5 standard years for a preliminary report. 3 to 5 years. Chen thought about the massive structures her people had detected, growing larger and more active each day. She thought about the probe ships that were already beginning to move toward inhabited systems. In 3 to 5 years, those ancient machines might have already decided that galactic civilization was a threat that needed to be eliminated. I understand the Council's position, Chen said finally. Humanity will await the committee's findings. But even as she spoke the words, Chen was already planning. She activated her personal communicator with a subtle gesture, sending a coded message to the human fleet commanders waiting in nearby systems. The message was simple: prepare for independent action. As the council session ended and the various delegates began filing out of the Great Hall, Chen remained at her podium. She watched the other ambassadors chatting casually about trade agreements and cultural exchanges. They had no idea that something ancient and terrible was stirring in the darkness between stars. The Zephyrian delegate floated over to her, its misty form shimmering with concern. Ambassador Chen, your species always seems to worry about dangers others cannot see. Is this truly as serious as you believe? Chen looked at the gentle being that had become a friend over the years. The Zephyrians were traders and artists, not warriors. They had never known the kind of existential threats that had shaped human history. I hope I'm wrong, Chen said quietly. But my species learned long ago that it's better to prepare for a disaster that never comes than to be caught unprepared when it does. The Zephyrian pulsed with colors that meant understanding, though Chen could tell it didn't really comprehend the depth of her concern. How could it? The Zephyrians had been part of galactic civilization for thousands of years. They had never known a time when survival wasn't guaranteed by the protection of the greater community. Humans remembered what it was like to be alone in a hostile universe. They remembered that survival was never guaranteed, that civilization was a fragile thing that could be destroyed by forces beyond anyone's control. That memory made them careful, made them plan for disasters that others couldn't imagine. As Chen walked through the crystal corridors of Nexus Station toward the human embassy section, she wondered if that memory would be enough to save everyone when the ancient guardians finally decided that the galaxy had grown too crowded for comfort. The emergency alert reached Chen's quarters at 347 station time, 3 months after her warning to the council. The message was brief but devastating. Outer Rim Colony Kepler 442b under attack by unknown vessels. Colony dark. No survivors detected. Chen was already reaching for her communicator when the second alert arrived. New Sydney Colony reports massive structures approaching. Evacuation in progress. Then a third. Mining station Omega-7 destroyed. Automated distress beacon confirms hostile contact. She rushed to the embassy's command center, where her staff was already monitoring incoming reports from across human space. The holographic display showed the galaxy with red warning markers spreading like a disease through the outer territories. How many colonies? Chen asked her military attaché, Commander Sarah Torres. 17 confirmed attacks, ma'am. All by the same type of vessels. Large geometric shapes that our sensors can barely read. They're not responding to any communication attempts. Chen studied the tactical display. The attacking ships were moving in a clear pattern, striking isolated outposts first before moving toward more populated systems. It was exactly what she had feared. The ancient machines were testing galactic defenses, learning about current technology before launching a full assault. Have you contacted the council? Chen asked. We sent the alert 6 hours ago, Torres replied. They've scheduled an emergency session for next week to discuss the situation. Next week. Chen felt a familiar anger building in her chest. 17 human colonies were already dead or dying, and the council wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss whether the threat was real. Get me Admiral Harrison on secure channel, Chen ordered, and prepare a message to all human ships in the outer systems. While her staff worked, Chen walked to the large window that looked out over Nexus Station's main docking area. She could see ships from dozens of species coming and going, their crews unaware that ancient death machines were systematically destroying everything in their path. The holographic projector activated, showing Admiral Harrison's weathered face. Behind him, Chen could see the bridge of the military cruiser Beijing, humanity's most advanced warship. "Admiral, what's our current fleet status?" Chen asked without preamble. "All outer patrol fleets are moving to evacuation positions," Harrison replied. "We've got transport ships en route to every threatened colony. But ma'am, we can't fight these things with what we have. The early reports suggest they're using technology beyond anything we've seen." "What about the Council? Are any other species mobilizing?" Harrison's expression grew grim. "The Altarian Defense Force has 3 ships investigating the attacks on their mining operations. The Zephyrians are studying the situation. Everyone else is waiting for the Council to tell them what to do." Chen wasn't surprised. Most species had relied on the Council's protection for so long that they had forgotten how to respond to real threats. They had committees for everything but emergency response fleets for nothing. "Admiral, I want you to begin Operation Sanctuary immediately," Chen said. Harrison nodded. Operation Sanctuary was humanity's contingency plan for exactly this kind of situation. Every human world had evacuation procedures in place. Every human ship knew where to rendezvous if the worst happened. Unlike the other species, humans had never stopped preparing for the possibility that civilization might fail to protect them. "Ma'am, what about the Council?" Harrison asked. "Are we really going to act without their approval?" Chen thought about the emergency session scheduled for next week. She thought about the committees that would be formed to study the situation. She thought about the months or years of debate that would follow while the ancient machines continued their systematic destruction of everything that lived. "The Council has made their priorities clear," Chen said finally. "Humanity will take care of its own people." Over the next 48 hours, Chen watched the human evacuation unfold with grim efficiency. Colony ships that had been disguised as merchant vessels revealed their true purpose, arriving at threatened worlds to evacuate civilians. Military transports that had been positioned throughout human space under the guise of routine patrols suddenly coordinated into a massive rescue operation. The numbers were staggering. 3 million humans evacuated from the outer rim, 12,000 ships involved in the operation. Emergency supply depots that had been secretly established years earlier suddenly activated to support the refugee fleet. Other species watched in amazement as humanity moved its entire outer rim population in less than 3 days. The Zephyrians sent a diplomatic note asking how such an operation was possible. The Altarians formally requested assistance with their own evacuation efforts. Chen authorized human ships to help any refugees they encountered, regardless of species. But she made it clear that humanity's primary responsibility was to its own people. The Council finally convened its emergency session 5 days after the first attacks. By then, the ancient machines had destroyed 43 colonies and mining stations. 12 species had lost territory to the advancing threat. Chancellor Vex 9 opened the session with typical Council formality. "We gather today to address the concerning reports from the Outer Rim territories. The Preliminary Investigation Committee has prepared an initial assessment of the situation." Chen listened as various delegates debated whether the attacks were real, whether they posed a genuine threat, and what the proper response should be. The crystalline representative suggested that the machines might be trying to communicate. The Vapor delegate proposed sending a diplomatic mission to negotiate with them. Finally, Chen stood up at the human podium. The chamber fell silent as delegates turned to hear what humanity's representative would say. 3 days ago, I received a formal vote from the Earth Council, Chen announced. By unanimous decision, humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The silence that followed was deafening. In 3,000 years of Council history, no species had ever voluntarily left the Assembly. Ambassador Chen, Chancellor Vex 9 said slowly, "Surely you cannot be serious. Humanity has been a valued member of this council for 237 years, Chen interrupted. During that time, we have helped solve countless disputes, prevented numerous wars, and contributed our knowledge and resources to the common good. We believed in the strength of unity, in the power of diverse minds working together." She paused, looking around the chamber at the delegates who had become colleagues and in some cases friends. But today, This council has shown us that unity means nothing when the time comes to act. Chen continued. 17 human colonies were destroyed while this council debated whether to schedule a meeting. Millions of beings are dead or displaced while you argue about proper procedures. We cannot and will not be part of an organization that values process over protection, politics over people. The Zephyrian delegate pulsed with distressed colors. But Ambassador, without the council, how will we coordinate our response to this threat? Chen's expression softened slightly as she looked at her old friend. Humanity will handle its own defense. Any species that wants our assistance need only ask directly. But we will no longer wait for committee approval to protect innocent lives. She gathered her personal belongings from the podium and walked toward the exit. Behind her, the council chamber erupted in confused debate. Some delegates called for her to reconsider. Others demanded to know what humanity planned to do next. Chen didn't look back as she left the Great Hall for the last time. She had work to do, and unlike the council, humanity didn't have time for endless discussion. In the Human Embassy's communication center, Admiral Harrison was waiting for her orders. Begin Phase 2, Chen said simply. Around the galaxy, human ships that had been integrated into alien fleets for decades suddenly received coded transmissions. Trade vessels that had been supplying alien worlds with critical resources quietly changed course. Human scientists and advisors working on alien projects began requesting emergency leave for family reasons. The galaxy was about to learn just how much it had come to depend on human innovation, human logistics, and human problem-solving, and they were going to learn it the hard way. The first signs appeared within a week of humanity's withdrawal from the Council. The Zephyrian Trade Federation, which had dominated galactic commerce for over 1,000 years, announced that their quarterly profit projections would need to be significantly revised downward. The reason was simple. Their human economic advisors, who had developed the complex algorithms that managed their trade routes, had all submitted resignations on the same day. Without human oversight, the Zephyrians' automated trading systems began making increasingly poor decisions. Ships carrying fresh food were sent to worlds that had no use for organic matter. Manufacturing supplies were routed to agricultural colonies that couldn't use them. Within days, the Federation's carefully balanced supply network was in chaos. Chen watched the reports from her temporary office aboard the transport ship New Geneva. She had refused to return to Earth, choosing instead to coordinate humanity's withdrawal from the mobile command center that was leading the refugee evacuation. The Altarian Defense Force is requesting an emergency meeting, reported Commander Torres. Their military strategies are failing without their human tactical consultants. Chen wasn't surprised. The Altarians had hired human military advisors 3 decades earlier, after suffering a series of defeats against space pirates in the Outer Rim. Under human guidance, their fleet had become one of the most effective fighting forces in the galaxy. Now suddenly, their officers were trying to run complex operations without the strategic frameworks their human consultants had developed. "What about our evacuation progress?" Chen asked. "Ahead of schedule," Torres replied. "We've evacuated 93% of human civilians from the danger zones. But ma'am, we're getting requests for assistance from other species. The Crystalline Collective has lost contact with 12 of their outer colonies. The Vapors are asking if we can help evacuate their research stations." Chen studied the tactical display showing the advancing wave of ancient machines. The attackers were no longer just hitting isolated outposts. They were beginning to probe the defenses of major systems, testing the responses of different species' fleets. "Authorize rescue operations for anyone we encounter," Chen said finally. "But make it clear that we're acting on our own initiative, not as representatives of any galactic authority." The human evacuation fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of the massive, slow-moving vessels that most species used for civilian transport, humanity had developed a network of smaller, faster ships that could rapidly move between systems. More importantly, these ships were equipped with technology that had been quietly developed in human research facilities over the past century. Human stealth systems made their ships nearly invisible to sensors. Human engines could travel faster and more efficiently than anything else in the galaxy. Human shields could deflect energy weapons that would destroy other vessels. While the rest of the galaxy had focused on trade and diplomacy, humanity had never stopped preparing for war. The first real test came when a human rescue ship, The Mercy's Edge encountered an ancient machine near the Altarian colony of New Harmony. The machine was a massive geometric structure, easily 10 times larger than the rescue ship, covered in weapon systems that radiated energy signatures unlike anything in current technology. Captain Maria Santos, commanding the Mercy's Edge, made a decision that would shock the galaxy. Instead of fleeing or trying to negotiate, she ordered an attack. The battle lasted exactly 4 minutes. The ancient machine, designed to fight the weapons and tactics of millions of years ago, was completely unprepared for human military technology. Energy beams that should have destroyed the rescue ship were absorbed by adaptive shields. Missiles that should have been unstoppable were intercepted by point defense systems that tracked targets faster than light. When the machine finally exploded, Captain Santos calmly continued her evacuation mission as if nothing had happened. Word of the victory spread quickly through the refugee network. Other human ships began engaging the ancient machines whenever they encountered them, and the results were consistently the same. The supposedly invincible guardians of the void were no match for weapon systems they had never been designed to counter. But humanity wasn't sharing their tactical data with the Council or anyone else. When desperate Altarian commanders begged for information about human weapons technology, they were politely told that such information was classified. "This is not the humanity we knew," the Zephyrian delegate reported to an emergency council session. "Their ships move like ghosts through space. Their weapons destroy machines that our combined fleets cannot even damage. They rescue civilians from every species, but they offer no assistance to our military forces." Chancellor Vex 9 processed this information with growing concern. "What do we know about their current activities?" "Very little," admitted the crystalline representative. "Human ships appear and disappear without warning. They seem to be establishing some kind of supply network, but our sensors cannot track their movements. It is as if they have become invisible to our technology." The truth was even more disturbing than the Council realized. Humanity hadn't just been developing better weapons and ships during their centuries as Council members. They had been preparing for the possibility that galactic civilization might fail them. Every human trade ship that had visited alien worlds had been secretly mapping those worlds' defenses and infrastructure. Every human advisor working with alien governments had been quietly identifying critical weaknesses in their systems. Every human scientist collaborating on research projects had been gathering intelligence about alien technology and capabilities. Now, as humanity withdrew from galactic society, they were using that knowledge to systematically disable the technological infrastructure they had helped build. Space stations that had been designed with human input suddenly experienced technical malfunctions in their critical systems. Trade routes that had been optimized by human logisticians became mysteriously inefficient. Even the Council's own headquarters, Nexus Station, began experiencing power fluctuations and communication breakdowns. They built trapdoors into everything, Admiral Harrison explained to Chen during one of their daily briefings. "Every system our people helped design has hidden access codes, backdoor protocols, and remote shutdown capabilities. The aliens thought they were getting human expertise to improve their technology. They were actually letting us install kill switches in their entire civilization." Chen felt a mixture of pride and sadness as she reviewed the reports. Pride because her species had been wise enough to prepare for this possibility. Sadness because they had been forced to use those preparations. "What's the status of the Council's response to the machine threat?" she asked. "Complete disaster," Harrison replied bluntly. "Without human tactical support, their combined fleets are taking massive casualties. The Altarians lost 3 full battle groups yesterday. The Crystallines are abandoning their outer territories entirely. The only species having any success are the ones with human-designed weapon systems, and even those are running out of ammunition because human supply ships have stopped delivering to alien worlds." Through the viewports of the New Geneva, Chen could see the lights of other human ships maintaining formation around them. Hundreds of vessels that had once served alien masters were now working together to save as many lives as possible from an ancient threat that the Council was proving incapable of fighting. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. Humanity's withdrawal from galactic society was only the first phase of a larger plan, one that had been quietly developed by human leadership over decades of watching the Council's failures. The galaxy had taken humanity's contributions for granted for too long. They had assumed that human willingness to help was the same thing as human dependence on alien protection. They were about to learn just how wrong they had been. And the ancient machines advancing from the void were about to learn something even more important. That the humans they faced were not the same species that had joined the Galactic Council 2 centuries earlier. They were something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. 6 months after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, the ancient machines controlled nearly a quarter of the galaxy's outer rim territories. Entire species had been forced to abandon their homeworlds, fleeing toward the more populated core systems, where they hoped the combined fleets of the Council could protect them. The Council itself was in chaos. Without human economic advisors, interstellar trade had collapsed. Without human engineers, critical infrastructure systems were failing across dozens of worlds. Without human mediators, old conflicts were flaring up again as species that had been enemies for millennia resumed their ancient grudges. Chancellor Vex 9 stood before an assembly that was barely half full. Many delegates had been forced to evacuate their homeworlds and were governing their people from refugee ships. Others had simply stopped attending council sessions, choosing to focus on their own species' survival rather than participate in debates that seemed increasingly meaningless. "The situation continues to deteriorate," the Chancellor announced, his metallic voice echoing through the partially empty chamber. "The machine advance has accelerated, and our combined fleets have been unable to achieve any significant victories against them." The Altarian representative, General Keth 5, looked exhausted. His proud warrior species had lost nearly half their territory to the ancient machines. "Our scouts report that the machines are building something in the conquered territories. Massive structures that dwarf anything we have ever seen, but our ships cannot get close enough to determine their purpose. Perhaps it is time to reconsider our position regarding humanity," suggested the Zephyrian delegate. The gentle trader species had been hit particularly hard by the collapse of galactic commerce. "They are the only ones who have successfully engaged these machines in combat." "Humanity abandoned us," snapped the representative from the Core Worlds Alliance. "They chose isolation over cooperation. Why should we beg for their assistance now?" Chancellor Vex 9 considered this question carefully. Several species had already attempted to contact human authorities directly, requesting military assistance or technological aid. In every case, the response had been the same: a polite but firm message stating that humanity was no longer part of galactic civilization and could not provide the requested assistance. But the Chancellor knew something that most of the other delegates did not. 3 weeks earlier, Nexus Station's long-range sensors had detected massive human fleet movements in the outer rim territories. Ships unlike anything in the human military catalog were moving toward the zones controlled by the ancient machines. "I have received a communication from Ambassador Chen," the Chancellor announced. The chamber fell silent immediately. "She has requested a private meeting to discuss what she calls the changing strategic situation." The meeting took place in a small conference room aboard Nexus Station, with only the Chancellor and 2 other senior council members present. Chen arrived alone, wearing a simple black uniform that bore no diplomatic insignia. She looked older than when she had left the council chambers 6 months earlier, her face marked by the stress of coordinating humanity's massive refugee operation. "Chancellor," Chen said simply, taking a seat at the conference table, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Former Ambassador Chen," the Chancellor corrected himself. "What brings you back to Nexus Station?" "The same thing that has always motivated humanity's actions," Chen replied. "The preservation of life and civilization. We need to discuss what happens next." She activated a holographic projector that showed a map of the galaxy. The red zones indicating machine control now covered nearly a third of all inhabited systems. But there were new markers on the display, blue dots that indicated human fleet positions. "As you can see, humanity has been monitoring the situation," Chen explained. "Our analysis indicates that the ancient machines are not simply destroying galactic civilization. They are harvesting it." The Chancellor's optical sensors focused intently on the display. "Harvesting?" "The structures your scouts have observed are processing facilities," Chen said. "The machines are not interested in territory or resources in the traditional sense. They are collecting and analyzing the technological and biological achievements of every species they encounter. They are learning." One of the other council members, a crystalline being named Resonance 7, spoke in harmonious tones that translated as concern. Learning for what purpose? Chen's expression grew grim. To prepare for threats that exist beyond this galaxy. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected signs of similar machine networks in other galactic clusters. The ancient civilization that built these guardians was fighting a war against something that spans multiple galaxies. They created these machines to ensure that any civilization that arose after them would be capable of continuing that fight. The implications of this revelation settled over the room like a heavy weight. The council members had been thinking in terms of survival against an ancient threat. They had not considered that this threat might be preparing them for an even greater danger. "Why are you telling us this?" the Chancellor asked. "Because humanity has made a decision," Chen replied. "We cannot allow these machines to continue their harvesting operation. The cost in lives is too high, and the risk that they will decide galactic civilization is not worth preserving is too great." She changed the holographic display, showing new tactical information. Human fleet movements that had been mysterious suddenly made sense. Humanity wasn't retreating from the machine advance. They were positioning themselves for a coordinated strike against the ancient Guardian's primary installations. "You intend to attack them directly," the Chancellor stated. "We intend to end this threat permanently," Chen corrected. "But we wanted to inform the Council of our plans as a courtesy." "A courtesy?" Resonance 7 sang in confused harmonics. "You are planning to engage in combat operations that could affect the entire galaxy, and you consider it a courtesy to inform us?" Chen stood up from the conference table, her expression hard. "The Council has had 6 months to develop an effective response to this threat. In that time, you have lost nearly 40% of the galaxy's inhabited systems. Your combined fleets have achieved no significant victories. Your refugee populations are overwhelming the core worlds, creating humanitarian crises that you seem incapable of managing." She paused, letting the truth of those words sink in. "Humanity will handle this threat because no one else can," Chen continued. "We are not asking for permission and we are not seeking approval. We are simply informing you that this situation will be resolved within the next 30 days. The Chancellor processed this information with growing alarm. "Ambassador Chen, surely you realize that unilateral military action of this scope could have unpredictable consequences. The Council must have input on any strategy that affects the entire galaxy." Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "The time for committees and input sessions has passed, Chancellor. The galaxy's survival is too important to be left to democratic debate." As she prepared to leave the conference room, Chen turned back to address the council members one final time. "There is one more thing you should know," she said. "The machine's analysis of galactic civilization is complete. They have determined that most species lack the technological and military capabilities necessary to serve their purposes. They are preparing to eliminate approximately 80% of all intelligent life in the galaxy and start over with the survivors." The silence that followed was absolute. "Humanity will not allow that to happen," Chen stated simply, "with or without the Council's blessing." As the door closed behind her, the 3 council members sat in stunned silence. Outside the conference room, the great halls of Nexus Station continued to buzz with diplomatic activity. But it suddenly seemed meaningless. The galaxy's fate was no longer in their hands. The first reports came from the edge of machine-controlled space. Long-range sensors detected massive energy discharges and gravitational anomalies that suggested combat on a scale beyond anything in recorded history. But when council ships tried to investigate, they found only empty space where ancient machine installations had been. Admiral Harrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's newest and most advanced battleship. Around him, the command crew monitored displays that showed the complete destruction of Machine Complex Alpha 7, a massive installation that had controlled the ancient Guardian's operations across an entire sector. "Target eliminated," reported the tactical officer. "No surviving machine units detected," Harrison nodded grimly. The battle had lasted only 23 minutes, but it had required the coordinated firepower of an entire human battle group to destroy the facility. The ancient machines were formidable opponents, armed with weapons that could destroy planets and protected by shields that could deflect entire starfleets. But they had one crucial weakness. They had been designed to fight the technology and tactics of their own era. They were not prepared for weapon systems that manipulated space-time itself. or for ships that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Humanity had spent 2 centuries secretly developing these technologies while serving on the Galactic Council. They had used their access to alien scientific databases and their collaborative research projects to push the boundaries of physics far beyond what any single species could achieve alone. Now, for the first time, they were revealing the true extent of their capabilities. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Complex Beta 3, the communications officer reported. "The machines are attempting to negotiate." Harrison considered this carefully. In the 6 months since the machine advance had begun, the ancient Guardians had never attempted any form of communication with galactic species. They had simply appeared, analyzed, and destroyed everything in their path. "Put it through," Harrison ordered. The main display activated, showing a geometric pattern that slowly resolved into a form that resembled a mechanical face. When it spoke, the voice was a synthesis of every language known to galactic civilization. "Human forces," the machine intelligence said. "You demonstrate capabilities that were not present in our initial analysis. We request clarification of your technological origins." "This is Admiral Harrison of the United Earth Navy," Harrison replied. "You can address your questions to me directly." "Admiral Harrison, our records indicate that your species was incorporated into galactic civilization 2.3 centuries ago. At that time, human technology was primitive by galactic standards. How do you now possess weapon systems that exceed our defensive parameters?" Harrison smiled coldly. "Because we never stopped evolving. While the rest of the galaxy became comfortable with their place in civilization, humanity kept pushing forward. We knew that someday we might need to stand alone." The machine intelligence processed this information for several seconds. "Your species has exceeded expected development curves by several orders of magnitude. This suggests intervention by external factors or access to advanced technological databases." "Both," Harrison admitted. "We had access to the combined knowledge of 847 species, and we used it to develop technologies that none of them imagined possible." Another pause as the machine considered this revelation. "You have disrupted our harvesting operations," the machine finally said. "Our analysis of galactic civilization suggested that most species lacked the capability to resist our directive. Your interference was not anticipated. Your analysis was incomplete," Harrison replied. "You judged galactic civilization based on the performance of individual species. You failed to account for what humans could accomplish when we stopped limiting ourselves to the lowest common denominator." The machine's geometric face shifted slightly, perhaps indicating confusion or recalculation. "Admiral Harrison, we offer you terms. Cease your interference with our operations, and humanity will be exempted from the culling directive. Your species has demonstrated sufficient capability to serve our purpose. The other species have not." Harrison felt a cold anger building in his chest. The machine was offering to spare humanity in exchange for allowing the genocide of trillions of intelligent beings. "Counteroffer," Harrison said flatly. "Withdraw all your forces to the outer void and shut down permanently. In exchange, we won't finish what we started here." "That is not acceptable," the machine replied immediately. "Our directive cannot be altered. We will modify our tactical parameters to account for human capabilities and resume operations." "Then you've made your choice," Harrison said. He gestured to his tactical officer, who began entering targeting coordinates. "All ships prepare for full-scale assault. Primary target is the machine homeworld in the predecessor system." The transmission cut off abruptly as the machine installation began powering up its defensive systems, but it was too late. Human ships that had been moving into position for weeks were already beginning their attack runs. The predecessor system had been dead for millions of years, its star reduced to a dim red dwarf, surrounded by the massive mechanical constructs that the ancient civilization had built before their extinction. These constructs had manufactured and controlled the machine guardians for eons, slowly awakening as galactic civilization reached levels of technology that triggered their protocols. Now, for the first time since their creation, they faced an opponent capable of threatening their existence. The battle for the predecessor system lasted 18 hours and involved over 3,000 human ships. Energy weapons that could crack moons were met by human shields that bent space itself. Machine swarms that numbered in the millions were destroyed by weapons that manipulated matter at the quantum level. When it was over, the predecessor system was nothing but cooling debris and scattered radiation. The machine homeworld, A construct the size of a gas giant had been reduced to its component atoms, but the victory came at a cost. Humanity had been forced to reveal technologies that they had hoped to keep secret for another century. They had shown the galaxy exactly how far beyond their former allies they had evolved. Admiral Harrison stood in the observation deck of the Defiance, looking out at the debris field that had once been the greatest threat to galactic civilization. Around him, human ships were already beginning the long journey back to their new territories in the former void sectors. "Sir," his aide approached cautiously, "we're receiving priority communications from the Galactic Council. They're requesting immediate meetings to discuss our new capabilities." Harrison almost smiled. The Council wanted to talk now that the threat was over. They wanted to understand how humanity had become powerful enough to destroy enemies that their combined fleets couldn't even scratch. "Tell them we'll consider scheduling a meeting," Harrison said, "after we finish establishing our new borders." The aide looked confused. "New borders, sir?" Harrison gestured toward the vast, empty regions that had once been machine-controlled space. "Someone needs to administer these territories. Someone needs to make sure that threats like this never arise again. The Council has proven they're incapable of handling existential dangers." He paused, considering the magnitude of what they had accomplished and what it meant for the future. "Humanity protected this galaxy when no one else could," Harrison said finally. "Now we're going to make sure it stays protected." As the human fleet began its journey toward their new domains, long-range sensors detected something that changed everything. Deep in the void between galaxies, massive shapes were moving. Other machine networks, even larger than the one they had just destroyed, were beginning to take notice of the disturbance in this galactic cluster. The ancient war was far from over. But now, for the first time in millions of years, the machines would face opponents who were ready for them. Humanity had abandoned the Council's table, but they had not abandoned the galaxy. They had simply decided that some responsibilities were too important to be left to committees and democratic debate. The age of galactic democracy was ending. The age of human protection was about to begin.